meeting to order and begin this meeting with a kind of exciting introduction of our two new, and Connie should be here as well, with our two new commissioners, Kristen Kerr and Robin Scribner. We had a lovely meeting. Evan and Melissa and myself and Jenny had a kind of an all-day meeting with Kristen and Robin here at the house about 2 weeks ago, and I had a good time. Robin, do you want to kind of introduce yourself to the commissioners and say a little bit about yourself and life on the farm?
The life on the farm. I'm Robin Scribner. I'm from Geraldine, Montana. I was a former teacher for 29 years. I retired a couple of years ago. I am the chief cook, bottle washer, and babysitter during harvest right now. So I told my daughter she couldn't go out to the field yet because she needed to keep the grandkids out of the background. I'm really excited to be on the commission. We had a wonderful meeting. The Jenny, Genevieve, Melissa, Evan, and Bruce were all. It was just so informative, and I'm very excited to be here.
I'm so glad.
That's great. And Kristen, can you tell us about life on your farm?
Sure. I'm Kristen Kerr. I know Dalton. We didn't get to see each other the other day. That's from quite a while back.
Oh, interesting.
I'm a realtor here in Helena at Big Sky Brokers. Before that, when we lived in St. Louis, previous to 2013, I was an elementary school teacher as well. So I have that. And then I discovered on our meeting that the Montana State Library is just more than them governing like the brick and mortar little area community libraries, and found out that they, Evan himself covers all of the Montana cadastral on his watch, and which I use every single day in my business, and I have to use that. So I was asked to be on this committee, and now I'm very excited to be on this commission. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to being with all of you.
Well, I think it's going to be fun, and I think we will do good work together. I think that's fun. We'll be having a new member joining us after the departure of just one of my favorite people, Connie Behe. Do you want to say a word?
Yes, so I can't believe I'm leaving the commission. I was appointed at end of the summer or fall, and have really enjoyed it so far and looked forward to being on here for quite a while with you. I did accept a position at Pierce County Library in Tacoma, Washington, where I'll be one of 2 deputy directors. It's quite a bit bigger system. You know, I work at Imagine Libraries in Kalispell. It's considered a large system in Montana Public Library, 37 staff, 3.25 locations. There it's 300 staff, $39 million budget. It's so different. So I'm looking forward to this next phase, but I will miss the library community tremendously. Jenny staff, especially, as I was poking around, looking at this position, asking people about it, there are so many people who have great things to say about Jenny in the library world. I'm not sure if you all or everyone knows how lucky Montana State is to have Jenny at the helm. So they're doing great work. And yes, thank you for having me for as long as I was here.
Thank you, Connie.
Well, thank you. You've been really terrific. Jenny, do you want to say a word about Connie?
Well, when I read your statement, Connie, about your departure, first I was struck that you've been with us for 12 years. Where does the time go? It goes by in such a hurry. And in that time, we have watched such market change and market advancements in the work of Imagine If Libraries. And I know your vision for public service was really at the heart of a lot of those changes that ImagineIF has implemented, from how you've redesigned customer service to even the rebranding of that library, with such a community focus and a focus on the future of libraries. And I've said it time and time again, I really believe that ImagineIF Library is the flagship library in the state of Montana, that when I talk about the future of libraries, it's that library that I point to. And it's because of your leadership that ImagineIF is such a leader in the state. So we will miss you greatly.
Thank you for the kind words, Jenny.
And while we're introducing ourselves, let's have the remaining commissioners introduce themselves. Dalton.
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, guys. Hi, Kirsten. Hi, Robin. Kirsten, great to reconnect one day when I'm back in Helena. And it'd be great to connect with you and everyone else at the Montana State Library, finally in person again. For those of you who don't know, I live and work in Missoula. I'm a graduate student at the University of Montana, and I work for the City of Missoula in the Human Resources Department. I, like a few, did not have library or the depth of library knowledge before I joined the commission. I've learned so much, and Connie, before your departure, I just want to say thank you so much for your leadership and my observation and your championship towards social equity and anything that you've brought forward. Your narrative has been the true north, and I've appreciated learning and growing with you in my role here. So thank you. And that's where I'll leave with my introduction.
Thank you, Dalton. Elsie, please.
Good morning. As state superintendent, we're placed on this commission, I believe, Jenny, through statute.
Yes, ma'am.
And, I take my role very serious, and I know I've missed a few, but not a lot, not since the pandemic. I think there's been a lot more connection, because literacy, family literacy, community literacy, and of course, especially children's literacy is important. But the library does much more than that. We use library cadastral and everything through the land board that I'm constitutionally part of. So it's a great opportunity. So welcome, Kristen. It's nice to see that you have education in your background, but we all do. We have all been to some sort of education, and majority in public school, which I'm really honored to lead. And the other one is Kathy, correct? Is that the new one that we have on?
Robin.
Robin. Excellent. I don't have you on my screen. So it's going to be nice when we get to know each other and understand that our backgrounds in Montana, with less than a 6-degree separation, we have some connection of family or connection of some experience that's there. And Connie, I just want to say thank you. I'm excited. One of the things in education that we do is there's always that reach for that gold ring somewhere, to move somewhere, to improve, to expand, to enhance, all of that in the innovation that we've had. I appreciate your voice, and your voice is going to continue. So reach back to Montana when you learn great things, so that our commission can also be that bright star in the West along with it. So with that, Bruce, thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. And finally, Kenning, could you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenning Arlidge. I'm the Dean of the Library at Montana State University in Bozeman, and I am the Higher Education appointee to the Commission. So Robin and Kristen, welcome to the Commission. I look forward to working with you. And Connie, sorry to see you go, but it sounds like you have a great opportunity in Washington. So.
I think it'd be useful, if briefly other folks staff members who are on this call could introduce themselves, and staff members and others. And Jenny, if you would lead off, please.
Sure, happily. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for a special meeting of the Commission this morning Also for your flexibility in moving this meeting. It had been originally scheduled for a little bit earlier in July, and with our 2 new appointments, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to get to know them a little bit and begin the introductions to the State Library before they participate in this important meeting. So thanks for your flexibility. I'm the State Librarian. I've been the State Librarian since 2012 and consider it an honor and a privilege to work with all of you.
And hello, everybody. My name is Melissa Briggs, and I am the Central Services Administrator here at the State Library. Coming up on 3 years here that have flown by, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Hi, Evan Hammer, Digital Library Administrator at the State Library. While I don't personally maintain all aspects of cadastral for the State Library, I am fortunate enough to work with some really great folks that do maintain that site, among many other really great services. Thank you.
I'm Genevieve Lighthizer. I'm the admin assistant with the library, and I just started this past January.
Thank you, Genevieve. Sharon.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Hardwick. I'm the Human Resource Specialist with State Library. I've been here just over a year, and I'm really enjoying being with the library.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Morning. I'm Jennifer Brunell. I'm the director of the Montana Memory Project, and welcome to our new members.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Tracy, I think you're the last one on my screen.
Hi, I'm Tracy Cook. I'm the lead consulting and learning librarian with the Montana State Library.
Thank you, Tracy. Have I left anyone off? Okay. Well, let's begin the first item and the main item in our agenda today, and that is the Finance Committee report, which actually this conversation will be led by Melissa and Jenny. Just to say that Kenning and Dalton and I have met several times with Jenny and Melissa and others and talked about the upcoming budget and the report that you have today that Melissa will kind of lead us through. The memo, which is now showing your screen, is from the Finance Committee. And we have looked at it, and our recommendation is that this budget be adopted. But from there, Melissa, I'll let you or Jenny, either one, take her away, please.
Great, thank you, Bruce. We are excited to bring you this fiscal year's new budget. We just wrapped up fiscal year end last night, so we're really excited to have that behind us, especially me. Excited to have that behind us. We had a really great year and we got a lot of important work done. So it's time to move on to the next budget, which we actually took effect or will take effect on, it took effect on July 1st. So we're here to formalize a budget with you all so that we can get that in the system and get started with our new year. So like Bruce said, we've met with the Finance Committee several times to go over the recommendations and the priorities that they have. And so this is the end product of those discussions. We typically, well, in the past, we've had really tight budgets, we've had cuts, we've been dealing with either cuts or just status quo. So in that respect, we've had a little bit of a different experience in creating this budget this year because of the fruitful legislative session that we just had. So overall, we have almost $2 million in new funding that was appropriated by the legislature. And of that, 75% of it is ongoing, and for about 450,000 of that is one-time only monies. So I wanted to put together a chart to show where increases and decreases happened as far as our funding goes. And so that's this first chart that you can see here. Our general fund appropriation increased by $239,000. I just want to point out that that is due to a couple of things. Firstly, statewide present law adjustments, which are made in the governor's budget. So Gianforte's budget was released to the legislature. It includes statewide present law adjustments. So for those of you that don't know, statewide present law just means the costs, the increased or decreased costs associated with maintaining the budget as it is. And so typically that's inflationary costs or statutorily mandated longevity increases for staff. Sometimes inflation goes down, and so our statewide present law numbers sometimes reduce our appropriation. In this case, this year, there was a statewide present law increase that was, rather minimal. Part of this $239,000 increase also includes an increase in fixed costs that we experienced, which is sort of out of our control. So fixed costs through ITSD increased. And so that increase was included in this general fund amount.
And for Robin and Kristen, ITSD is the State Information Technology Services Division. That's the division that we pay to host all of our IT services.
Thank you very much. That's great. Yeah, we'll define initialisms so as perfect.
It's hard to remember to explain all the acronyms because we could be here for a very long time. And then the other last thing I wanted to mention that's included in this increase in general fund are pay increases that were instituted through the legislature. That this biennium includes a one-time increase of 55 cents per employee. So the next line item is our OTO funding that we received in the previous legislative biennium. So our subcommittee was cognizant of the fact that we endured severe cuts in the 2017 session. And so they awarded a one-time only funding to sort of help us get along during the last session. So that amount went away because we were able to secure other sources of funding. So you'll see that there was a reduction in our overall funding of $150,000. The next funding source that's important to note is our 911 funding, which was secured through House Bill 50. And so that is new money that is, I think it extends for 10 years to implement next generation 911 technologies. So the next item is our coal severance tax fund. We did see a 10% reduction to that fund. That was recommended by the governor's budget office and approved by the legislature. So we saw a slight decrease in that funding this year. Next is our digital library services, which is, there's $117,000 increase. That is due to an addition made by Governor Gianforte during the session, which included an increase in funding from other agencies that send dollars to us that utilize our services, so we can continue to provide those services to those agencies. Next on the list is our Montana Land Information Fund, which saw the largest increase of $830,000, and that is due to House Bill 49, which increased the fee that is seen at the local level for recordation fees.
If I could jump in on this point really quick. I think most of you know that House Bill 49 doubled the amount of the recordation fee from $1 to $2. And as a reminder, we split that amount with local governments. So $1.50 of that $2 comes to the state library, and then 50 cents is distributed to the county where those fees are collected. the reason you don't see a doubling of the appropriation in those dollars in this budget, as you might expect, since the fee was doubled, is that the appropriation here is based on the last 5-year average of those collections. So they didn't simply double our appropriation. When this appropriation was added to our budget, they did a look back over the last 5 years and appropriated the last 5-year average. So I just didn't want that to be a point of confusion for people if you knew that the fee doubled, but you don't see that doubling in our budget.
Okay. The next item that we see an increase in funding is through is also Emiliac funding, but it is one-time only money that is in the amount of $462,000. So that amount will be appropriated to us in FY22 and then also in FY23 in order to stand up the real-time network. There is a minimal $40,000 increase in our LSTA Library Services Technology Act funding. That is pushed, that comes down from IMLS, a federal agency, so that's sort of out of our control, but meant to cover inflationary increases. And then about the same amount of increase through our shared catalog fund, which is the proprietary fund. For Robin and Kristen, that was what I was talking about last Friday. That is our where we charge the fees out, and so it's a self-sufficient fund.
So before we move on to expenditures or further discussion, are there any questions regarding this table on the first page of the memo that talks about appropriations?
I have a question, Bruce. Melissa, can you say what the total increase is again? I think you said it at the beginning, but I didn't catch it.
Yeah, it's almost $2 million, and approximately 75% of that is ongoing and 25% is one time only during this biennium.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Connie.
What does the decrease in the coal severance tax impact?
Want me to
Well,
jump?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So that's an interesting question, because this is a decrease in appropriation, but that legislation that decreased our appropriation also allows for a general fund backfill if coal severance tax dollars fall below the appropriation. And so in terms of real cash that we will have to spend, we estimate that we have about $90,000 more in real money that we can budget. We actually set aside about, I think it was more than $100,000 in this last fiscal year that we just never spent because we knew that the cash would not come in. So in terms of our ability to budget and spend, it really doesn't have an impact because we know we will have actually more cash to spend than we've had in the last fiscal years.
So this is a change in appropriation, but not necessarily, but not a change in revenue flowing into the agency.
Exactly right. Obviously, this has long-term impacts. You know, were the cash to recover or had the appropriation not been decreased and the backfill happened, we would have had that much more money to spend. But this change will not have an immediate impact on the services that we're currently funding.
I think the headlines in the paper yesterday were for something over 20% decrease in coal being harvested, so to speak. Other questions? Good questions. Kristen and Robin, are you happy with all of this?
Yeah, especially since we got the tutorial last week. I feel like, you know, everything I went down on this list, I knew what it was about and kind of had the heads up last week. So.
Well, that's great. We'll give Jenny and Melissa and Evan a passing grade. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. Genevieve, could you scroll to the next page? Thank you. So now we'll just talk a little bit about how the budget was actually created. We started with FY21's base budget and sort of kept everything status quo, and then applied the new appropriations that were awarded, and went through a pretty strenuous process of prioritizing the needs and balancing the requests coming from the Network Advisory Council, the Montana Land Information Council, and also, making sure that we're following statutory requirements that are attached to the certain types of funding that were given during the session, and making sure that we're prioritizing what the legislature made clear was important to them as well. So here we've sort of separated out those priorities by type, and so we added several modified positions to support those priorities. I wanted to talk a little bit about what a modified position is, because you'll hear me say that a lot. You'll hear people in the legislature say that a lot. And it's important to know the difference between a modified position and a permanent FTE. So permanent FTE are in our base budget, and they are automatically included with the creation of each new budget during the biennium. A modified FTE is a position that we can request through the governor's budget office, and it has to be approved based on funding as it's available. And so during our legislative session, we were not given any permanent FTE, and so all of the FTE that we need to hire to do these new services are going to have to be requested through the modified FTE process. So each year we have to go and redo this request, and it's only approved as the funding is deemed available by the governor's office. So several positions that will be requesting a modified FTE to support the new Next Gen 911 services, real-time network, and then several GIS positions. We also included in this budget some market pay adjustments that will keep us in line with the state's pay plan and the 2020 market that was just released and became effective on July 1st. I think Jenny's going to talk a little bit more about this in detail after I go through my spiel. This budget also includes an increase to direct state aid to libraries. That increased by, I think it was about $35,000 this year, and that is direct funding that we transfer to local libraries to help support their operations. We also included our federation payments, which that number has stayed the same, that those payments go directly to the federations throughout the state. So, like I've said a couple of times, the legislative priorities that we funded in our budget include the 911 work, which will be contractual and also an FTE, monies to upgrade and develop further the cadastral application, also the costs associated with setting up the real-time network and getting that on its feet so that it can be self-funding in the future. We also included additional funding for the Montana Natural Heritage Program. So there are several other priorities that we included that came from recommendations from our Emiliac Council and our NAT Council. Emiliac priorities include the strategic, implementing the strategic plan that they work on and provide to you as the commission each year. Also the development of the land cover data and public land survey system grants, which we give to the local governments. And then as far as NAC, we included funding for the virtual fall workshop, our trustee training, and the digitization of the Montana Memory Project.
Are there any questions or comments about this part of Melissa's report or the Finance Committee's memo?
I have one other thing that I just want to add before I wrap up, Bruce, if that's okay.
Please, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. I wanted to talk a little bit about the federal indirect rate, which is included in this budget. So last year, I submitted to the federal government our request for the ability to charge a federal indirect rate to grants and contracts. And that was approved at 36.8%. And so this budget includes the known overhead rates that we will be able to recover during the next fiscal year. That is not inclusive of all the contracts that we will be able to charge. That we just don't know what all those contracts are as of this point. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that I wanted to be very conservative as far as budgeting for those indirect rates. And so I only included the dollars that I for contracts that are already signed or that I know for sure will come to fruition. So there will be an opportunity to recover additional funding. I just don't feel comfortable including that in this budget since I'm not sure what those dollars will be. But as those dollars become available, it will free up funding in our existing budget, and we'll be able to include other priorities approved by the commission.
Thank you very much.
All I have, yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Jenny, did you want to add anything to this stuff, this page?
Yeah, two things. There's a note in the memo that this budget is based on legislative action. It's based on what's been legislatively appropriated to the state library. Melissa mentioned that we get additional grants and contracts throughout the year. We also have the American Rescue Plan Act monies that have been appropriated to the state library through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That's about $2.2 million. Those dollars are not reflected in the startup budget. You will see those dollars included in future financial reports that the commission gets as we go through that budget change process that Melissa mentioned that has to be approved by the governor's office. And so you will see those dollars added and those priorities added to the overall budget and financial reports in your future commission meetings.
And Jenny, could you please characterize those briefly?
Sure. So, you know, some of the grants and contracts that we get, we have an ongoing contract with the Natural Resource Conservation Service to help fund work to support wetland digitization and to help support development of that land cover data set. We're working right now on a contract that's just been signed with the Secretary of State's office that will, they are contracting with us to provide them GIS expertise as they work to implement what's called geo-enabled elections, a more precise way of mapping election boundaries to make sure that people are registering and voting in their proper voting districts. Our American Rescue Plan Act funds have been prioritized into 3 buckets. The first bucket is continuing our hotspot lending program that I think you're all familiar with. There's funding there that will allow us to contract for the upgrade of the internal cabling and wiring and routers for those public libraries that require that kind of technology upgrade to improve their broadband speeds. And then the third bucket for ARPA funds will allow us to continue to both develop and purchase additional e-content to support e-learning in the state of Montana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions about that?
you'll see those dollars and more discussion about those programs as we move throughout the fiscal year. I did want to provide more detail about the market pay adjustments that Melissa mentioned. That's something that is not unusual for us to include in our budget, but there have been a couple of changes to that process that have resulted in more substantial market adjustments than we would typically see in our budget. In 2017, the legislature passed a bill that mandated that the state of Montana develop a new classification system for how state employees are classified. And for Kristen and Robin's benefit, as an agency of state government, we follow the state of Montana, the Department of Administration's process for how positions are classified, what job codes are assigned to those positions. And then the state of Montana is also responsible for doing a market analysis of pay for all of those positions. And they do that every 2 years. Melissa mentioned that the 2020 market analysis just went into effect on July 1. We as an agency have a pay plan policy that's based on a template developed by the Department of Administration. And it says that to the extent that funding allows, we pay our employees according to that market analysis for the pay band associated with each job code. What changed in 2017 is that the legislature mandated that the state of Montana redo its classification process. That recommendation was based on an audit that had been done by the Legislative Audit Division that found that across state government, positions that you would think were similar were actually classified very, very differently. And the legislature wanted to see much more consistency across the types of positions. So an accountant is an accountant is an accountant, and everybody understands what that means. That work concluded this spring, and all positions in state government were evaluated against this new classification system, including our employees. We actually worked with an independent contractor to make sure that all of our job descriptions were current, so that we knew that all of the resulting classifications would be correct and accurate. And then the Department of Administration reviewed all of the recommendations from that independent contractor and approved all of those recommendations. As a result, 16 of our 49 positions have been reclassified to new job codes. And so as a result, we need to make sure that our pay for those positions now aligns with market pay for those new classifications. And to put that into context, prior to this new classification process, there actually wasn't a GIS classification within state of Montana's classification system. There is now under the new classification system. 22% of our employees are GIS professionals, and so they've moved into this new occupation, and that's at a higher pay range than they were previously offered under their previous classification, resulting in the need for this market pay adjustment. We've seen similar pay adjustments in our IT bands. Melissa, Evan, and I were previously classified in a managerial classification. Our positions were reclassified to an executive pay band. And the 2020 market adjustment also included pay upgrades for the librarian classification and a few other of our position classifications. So this action is taking that classification process that was conducted by the state and making sure that our pay aligns with the state's 2020 market analysis.
Are there any questions or comments from commissioners about this summary of expenditures for the coming year?
Jenny, I have a quick question. Were all of the adjustments in pay, were they increases or were there any decreases?
That's a good question, Kristen. Not all employees will receive a pay increase. No employee will receive a pay decrease. There were job classifications within the job codes for some of our employees where there was not a market increase, or where our employees were at the target market where they should be paid according to our pay plan. And so in those cases, those employees will not see a market adjustment.
Any other questions for Jenny before we move on to the last page of this memo?
Jenny, this is Elsie. So just from review from our agency and how this process was, the move that was required by statute to this pay plan was pay neutral. In other words, there was no requirement for government or the legislation to enhance anybody's pay or to remove anybody's pay. But the reclassification aspect, did you use the state classifier for these positions? And could you tell me how many were classified to the increase of the market pay?
Good questions, Elsie. So we used both CMS here in Helena to do the classification. As a small agency, we don't have a classifier on staff. And so we are required to use the state of Montana's classifiers at the Department of Administration. So our classifications actually went through 2 reviews. They were reviewed and recommended by CMS, and then those had to be approved by the Department of Administration. So that's how the classification process came about for our agency. Our pay plan says that to the extent that funding allows, we pay positions according to the target market that's laid out in our pay plan. So that's what's driving this recommendation for these market adjustments. I think it's about 25% of our employees do not see a market adjustment, and about 75% would see a market adjustment. And the other point that I would make is that we are doing this within our existing budget, as you'll see as we get into the details of the budget.
Thanks, Jenny. So just as a quick, I'm sorry, Bruce, just as a quick, what did this percentage of 75% increase for market adjustment affect the budget then moving forward? And of course, we're looking for sustainability, you know, an infusion to aid our state employees on goes. In other words, it's not something that's just an one time only or an OTO. So I'm just looking at that impact then on the budget. Thank you.
Yeah.
So actually there was no impact on the budget, was there?
Well, we're spending existing, this is within existing budget. You know, as Elsie said, we're committing to an ongoing expense. I'll let Melissa talk a little bit about the cost and how that cost is spread across our different funding sources.
So overall, these increases amount to about a $450,000 to $500,000 change in personal services. That is spread across all of those funds that we went over. So the impact to each individual fund is, you know, fairly minimal. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that those increases will be offset by that federal indirect rate as those as that funding comes in. So just want to reiterate that the increases are spread across all of our different funding sources. It's within our existing budget. We're not increasing our budget in any way whatsoever. And that as we get those federal indirect recovery charges, those can be applied to offset that cost.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Jenny.
And Connie, you have your hand up.
I just have a question about the labor environment there in Helena and at the state in particular? Are you seeing positions go unfilled, or are you getting any feedback about the cost of living, or people who would maybe not relocate for a position because of pay? Or I know we're experiencing that here, and so I know that our county administrator is kind of brainstorming any number of creative ways to get people to come here because jobs are going unfilled. Are you seeing any of that?
Yeah, so let me give you both some statistical and anecdotal information as we've been looking at the need for this change. And Kristen can probably speak a little bit to just the housing market overall, but the cost of housing is very concerning. The cost of rent is very concerning. We just hired a new position to support the Montana Shared Catalog, and those positions can work remotely. And our new employee bought a house in Cut Bank because she could not find affordable housing closer to Helena. We've lost one employee to the Department of Agriculture already this spring for a substantially higher amount of pay. We, in working with CMS, asked them information about the market analysis that the state of Montana conducted, particularly for that GIS classification, since that was new. And they said that they had done a similar market analysis for that classification for Missoula, and found that what the state was recommending for the market analysis was consistent with what they found. I just saw in the paper, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to go back and look at the article to provide the context, but the economist, Mr. Barkley from U of M, reported to some group yesterday that pay across the state of Montana has increased 20% since last year. So we're feeling the upward pressure on pay as we go forward.
I would just add to thank you for finding a solution that fits within the budget. I think that's a commendable approach and creative approach to this struggle that so many of us are feeling. And also in fairness and using tax dollars wisely to fairly compensate our civil servants. Thank you.
And if I could just really quickly reiterate, as a very large state agency, choice in a market is challenging, but it's very important. So we believe in telework, and we have almost half of our employees have signed a telework agreement. We know accountability is there, performance reviews are happening. When budgets are tight, making sure that there are flexibilities for families, because it's not just the employee, it's the family that they also are committed to. But we're looking at everything with flexibilities for our employees. But the market that I know in talking to our budget director at the state level, it's challenging to fill the positions that are required. And then we have all these federal dollars. And you need to have employees also deliver the dollars, monitor the dollars, and everything for the federal government. So it is the infusion itself has added a challenge to everything that all government is working on. But Connie, a great reflection, especially with what we do. Great government doesn't mean that what great government means is that we have great employees. And if we are going to work in a time of trouble, we need them even better. So, anything that we can do to enhance our employees, I believe is important, but we also have to look at sustainability. And that's, I think, the message that I bring is seeing what is the next step in the future. We've been through some tough times, Jenny, and, the RIF was challenging for our commission, and there are still lasting effects to that. So we have to monitor and have great leadership, and the commission is what gives that. Thank you.
So true. Thank you.
So just a brief note to my fellow commissioners. One of our members, Kenning, has a hard disconnect at 10. So if we may, these are good questions. Can we just move real quickly to the next page of this? And I would very much like it if we could actually entertain a motion and to vote on this in the next couple of minutes.
And Bruce, just to clarify, just to clarify, as the message I sent you at the beginning of the meeting, I have to be somewhere at 10. I can't.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So we need to move quite quickly. I apologize, Melissa and Kenny.
No, that's okay. I hadn't intended to go through the more detailed version of the budget. I just wanted it there for reference in case people wanted that. So I'm finished.
Thank
And
you.
Bruce, I'm happy to make a motion to approve this budget as outlined.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Do I hear a second?
So moved.
And is there any other, motion made by Kristen, seconded by Kenning. Is there any other discussion? I really don't want to cut process here. I'm
And
just
just for the record, the second was from Dalton.
from Dalton, yes? Yeah. Any other discussion about this budget? Well, I thank you very much for putting 2 hours discussion into 45 minutes. May we have a vote? All in favor of approving the budget as presented by the Finance Committee and staff, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much, all of you, for helping with this, with the time schedule. And Kenning, I apologize for, I didn't understand quite your extreme constraints. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, sorry about that.
There's just one other minor item in our agenda, and that is to say that if I recall correctly from our last meeting, that Connie had indicated that she would be willing to be nominated as vice chair. As she is now moving out of state, as much as we'd like to keep her, we probably have to come up with an option B. Is there any discussion of that?
I'd like to nominate Bruce to fill the role of vice chair for the upcoming year.
And I would accept. Are there any others who would be willing to serve as vice chair? Just a reminder, we won't have elections of this until our next meeting, but this is sort of setting the stage. We have quite a large freshman class, so to speak, of commissioners coming in. So gird your loins, you'll have your opportunity soon. Is there any other business or announcements for the good of the company here?
Just super briefly, just a reminder, our next meeting is not on our normally scheduled day. We rescheduled that for August 19th. That's a Thursday. That will be a regular commission meeting starting at 9:30. We are planning to allow in-person meeting at that meeting. We're still waiting for additional guidance from the governor's office about more fully returning to normal public life. So right now we have limited access in our Grizzly conference room to 10 people. That's large enough to accommodate the size of this commission and a couple of us as staffers. So if you want to come to the meeting in person at the Grizzly room on the 19th of August, that's great. And Genevieve is making accommodation available, and she'll send out more information about that. If you would prefer to continue to attend on Zoom, we will make a Zoom option available for that meeting as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other business or announcements from commissioners or those attending? Hearing none, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Have a
all.
great weekend, everyone.
Thank you again, Connie.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Welcome, Kristen and
Bye.
Robin.
Bye.
Great new times, and we'll miss you, Connie.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.